people. To give you further information, we have invited the VIPs, guests to our presser. Mr. Zhou Xuewen, Secretary General of the National Flood Control and Drought Relief Command Headquarters, Vice Minister of Emergency Management, and Vice Minister of Water Resources. And he will take your questions later. Today we also have with us officials from the Ministry of Natural Resources, Mr. Fang Zhihong, Director General of the Policy Department, from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development, as well as the Director General from the Ministry of Water Resources, and Mr. Wang Yawei from China Meteorological Administration. First, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Zhou Xuewen. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends from the media, good morning. The CPC Central Committee attaches great importance to flood control and drought relief. President Xi Jinping, during his visit to Sichuan, pointed out that we must do a good work in the flood control and relief. He stressed that we must prevent big-scale floods and put forward great measures with larger-scale relief, and we must continue with efforts in the disaster relief and to reduce the loss of people's life and wealth. Our Premier Li Keqiang also made several instructions in this regard, and the State Council held an executive meeting to give further guidance in the disaster relief. And this year, the flood hit China at an early time, and the flood is with a larger scale. And the people's life and threat are under great threat. And the floods have several characteristics. First, strong rainfalls have taken place in China. The rainfall has been very intensive. There are 18 big floods in China, the big rainfalls, especially in South China. In Guangdong and Guangxi, the rainfall has hit the historical high, according to meteorological records. Also, in the north of Guangxi, the rainfall has hit over 2,000 millimeters. The floods have plagued China, the most part of China, a great amount of China, with strong rainfalls. Now, the floods in the Zhujiang River is very severe, and floods have taken place across over 480 rivers, and 40 of them have reported water levels above average. The floods are in Guangdong, Guangxi, especially in the Zhujiang River. There are two major floods. In Beijing, there is a ultra-large flood. The dangers are intensive posed by the floods. In Hunan and Guangdong, 11 reservoirs faced threats from floods. In parts of Xinjiang, there has been parts destroyed by the floods. And many regions are affected by the floods. Just in June, there are over 4,000 natural disasters posed by the floods, taking up nearly half of the natural disasters incurred by the natural disasters. For this year, the flood has affected 21.85 million people and created an economic loss of 4.76 billion RMB, causing 40 missing. based on a comparison year on year, our economic loss has been more. So the National Flood Control Office headquarters and the relevant departments have stressed that we must put people's life safety as our priority and follow the important instructions from General Secretary Xi Jinping. And we will take all-out actions to curb the floods. We will take the following measures. First, we will put our responsibility into concrete steps. We have organized over 2,000 administrative staff to help curb the floods. And we designated our people into county levels, into the village levels, so that they can shoulder their due responsibility and perform their duties in controlling the floods. And secondly, we renovated our work and searched for any potential dangers and risks. We held online and offline quarantine duties. And for those that have been listed as a step to be revised, we asked them to be carried out. We established in the major parts of the cities for performing the duties, and we have compiled a list to improve our work in the flood control. The emergency management of the National Flood Control Headquarters have built the flood response hospitals and addressed the problems in the hospitals to make the hospital response more effective. So that means we have made our response at community level more agile and more effective. The fourth measure is to make our commanding more effective, to perform our commanding duties in a scientific manner. And we have successfully controlled over 53 billion cubic meters of floods. During the flood in Zhujiang, we we discharged the water from Zhujiang and other rivers to help discharge the floods. Another measure is to strengthen our response and relief efforts, especially the disaster relief. We carried out 10 duties in the disaster relief, and we launched 5 emergency responses. We organized expert team to join on-site for the flood control. We called upon the National Oil and Food Reserve Department for meeting people's demand for food. And we reallocated our people in the flood area in a timely manner. We organized 560,000 people in the emergent response team. Now, the flood control work is entering a critical period. It is estimated that by July and August, the rainfall will be even larger and stronger in these parts of China. Xinjiang, Central China, and East China will meet with the periodic drought. So there will be a cyclone in China, landing in China. So we face arduous tasks in the flood control and the drought relief. During the flood period in the North China, the response work is quite weak. We must be highly alert. and be aware that we face the dual task of addressing the floods and the drought both in North China and South China. For the next steps, we will stick to the principle of keeping our bottom line and carry out strong measures for disaster relief so that the flood control and the disaster relief will be put into concrete actions, so that the floods in the cities will be discharged and people's life and wealth will be protected, and to make a safe environment for the convening of the 20th plenary of the Central Committee of CPC. Now the floor is open for questions. Please identify yourself before raising a question. I'm from China. I'm from China Media Group, China Radio. You know, we are entering a critical period for flood control. So what measures have the government taken to address this area? Thank you for your question. We face a critical period for flood control in July and August, especially in the later half of July and the first half of August. This is the most critical period for China's flood control work. Because rainfall will be especially strong in this season, especially in North China, the challenge is even more severe. During the past few years, according to our experience, the floods will take place mostly in these periods. I'm not sure if you can still recall a great rainfall and a flood in Beijing and Xingtai city of Hebei province years ago. The memory is still clear to us. And last year, we also faced a flood in Zhengzhou of Henan province. Just now, I have given you some information on controlling the major floods in the flood season. And I believe that we should press ahead with our work in disaster relief in the 5 following areas. First, we must take concrete actions. We must take early prevention. We must be fast in our response. First, we must ensure that responsibility is shouldered by the relevant authorities and the people. We will call upon the provinces and cities and the county levels to press ahead with their responsibilities and to identify the risks and challenges in the flood control, especially in the flood control critical period. We must designate special people to shoulder the responsibility. Secondly, we must make early prevention and the calculation about the floods. The Meteorological Department should do a good work in making estimations, and we must work in a concerted manner to calculate the risks and to prevent the risks from happening at an early stage. We must put in place a sound mechanism for joint prevention and control and take targeted measures. Thirdly, we must make early preventions. We should launch the emergency message at early stage and make sure that we will transfer the people and facilities at an early stage in an indirect manner. And we must ensure that all those that need to be transferred are transferred. So this is a critical link in the flood control. We must identify the targeted group to be transferred and the destinations of the people and how they will be transferred. Fourthly, the flood control and disaster response must be swift. For the critical regions and the critical parts of the flood control, we must take swift actions. We must ensure that the localities will better coordinate with the central government and make early response. Once a major risk is detected, we must ensure that collective efforts will be taken. So we need to ensure early prevention and early treatment. Fifth, we must take care of the details in the flood control. We must calculate and collect the funding for disaster relief in a detailed manner. We must ensure our people have enough food to eat, enough clean water to drink, and their medical needs are met in a timely manner. We must ensure that people's daily necessities are met. And we will distribute the daily necessities and the medical supplies to our people, to each household, to each member of the family. And we will help our people during the flood season. And we will strengthen our medical efforts, especially during the COVID-19 period. We must also accommodate our needs for the COVID-19 prevention and control. Thank you for your answer. Thank you. I'm with China's Daily. Recently, the rainfall has plagued the southern part of China, and the floods have been very strong. Can you brief us on your latest efforts in the disaster relief among our people and also your next step plans? Thank you. Let me answer your question. This is a question of common concern to all parties. Recently, there has been strong floods in the southern part of China. There has been 17 strong rainfalls and floods in South China, and causing the mud floods and slides in the mountain area. And this has posed severe challenges to our people's life. The Ministry of Emergency Management has been very serious in putting into action the instructions from General Secretary Xi Jinping. And we carried out fast response, and we organized an emergency response team to the locality. And we distributed the disaster relief supplies and the funding to the locality. Throughout this year, we have transferred over 1.239 million Chinese people in the flood area. For the moment, most of the flood-stricken people have returned to their homeland. We also set up centralized areas for allocating our people to ensure that people life. People lead a good life despite the floods. Next, we will take the following measures to press ahead with the disaster relief. First, we will report the major floods for those areas that have no access to electricity and water supply. And this will be a severe challenge and will spread to other regions. To address this problem, the Ministry of the Emergency Management has visited the flood-stricken areas to collect the needs of the locality and on the power supply, the water supply in the region. And these reports and information have been very critical to serve the decision-making in the flood control and disaster relief. We have equipped each village in the flood-stricken area with a satellite phone to better communicate with the rest part of China. Secondly, we have put into place a responsibility system to carry out a grid model management. And we have made the contingency plans to make sure that no one is left behind in the flood-stricken areas. Thirdly, we have taken concrete actions to transfer our people in an emergent manner. We strengthened the analytical efforts in the disaster relief and emergency response. We organized staff beforehand to help with the transfer of the people in the flood-stricken areas. Fourth, we distributed the disaster relief supplies to the people in the flood region. For those parts that do not need their people to be transferred, we organized a special expert team to visit the locality and listen to the needs of the people. We also provided daily necessities to each household and each member of the family, so that the care and the support from the government will be received by our people. Last but not least, we provided stronger support and supply to the emergent response. The central government guided the locality in the management of the centralized area for the transfer of the people and to guide them on the restoration of the houses and buildings of our people. We must make sure that no one will return to poverty because of the floods. From Beijing radio station, can you brief us on the characteristics of the weather since this year? Thank you for your question. Since China enters a flood season in March 17th, the rainfall has been stronger, and it has hit a historical high since 2017. The rainfall has two features. In South China, the Zhujiang River has witnessed the largest water flow and floods in history. And the temperature has been higher, much higher. The weather, the climate in China is quite different compared with the past years. There has been 18 strong rainfalls in different regions. Especially, the floods has been especially severe in 11 regions. The second characteristics is that the rainfall has been so strong. There has been 3,113 days with strong rainfalls, according to our calculation. In Guangdong, and the rainfall has been especially strong. In June, the central and eastern part of Hainan has witnessed precipitations of over 200 millimeters. The typhoon landed in China at a much later stage. And there were 4 typhoons landing in China. It's much at the same level compared with the average level of the past years. The typhoons landed in China much later than the previous years, but with a stronger scale. The typhoon has been stronger and causing cyclones, especially in Hainan, Guangdong, Guangxi, Hunan, Henan, Anhui. In over 60 rainfall collecting stations in these regions, the daily precipitation in this area on average is 421 millimeters. Fourth, the strong weather has been very obvious in these regions. In 26 regions and cities, these regions subject to the ice storms, and 17 typhoons have taken place in these areas. Compared with the same period of last year, the typhoons have been weaker. Well, the temperature also hit a historical high. On average, it is 31.1 degrees Celsius, down by 9 degrees Celsius. In Henan, Shanxi, Gansu, Ningxia, Shanxi, Shandong, Anhui, the average temperature hit a historical high compared with the previous years. Since June 23rd, the temperature has stayed high in these regions for a long period, and it has affected a large part of China. Since June 15th, 29 meteorological observation stations have collected data from Hebei and other parts of China that the temperature rises to over 40 degrees Celsius. Thank you. I'm from China Network. The extreme weathers have been more and more in China, and there have been floods in China. So how are the cities coping with the floods and the discharge? How do they discharge waters? Thank you for your question. Lately, the strong rainfalls take place in the south part of China, causing severe floods and disasters. So against this backdrop, the Ministry of Housing and Rural Urban Development followed the instructions of the General Secretary of Xi Jinping, and we make our people's life safety and wealth safety as our priority in coping with the disasters. We have taken 3 measures. First, before the flood season takes place, we have compiled a name list of 692 stations in China cities. Last year, on June 20th, there was a big flood in Zhengzhou city of Henan province. So this year we trained 9,000 technicians for flood control and disaster response. And we trained them in coping with the disasters and discharging water. The central government will continue to guide the local government in the emergent response. And we will ask the relevant local department to report the flood information to the upper level for better decision making. For the cities that meet the requirement for flood control, we will ask the heads of each department for the water discharge to report to the upper levels. And we will ask them to analyze the causes and address the problems. So under the commanding of the headquarters for the disaster, for the flood control and the drought relief, we will release the information on the strong rainfalls, especially the rainstorms, at the earliest stage. And we will caution our people against the potential rainfalls. We also carried out a field study on the flood control. The study has 5 working teams. We visited 15 cities for guiding the locality in the flood control. By the 7th of July, that is yesterday, 52 cities have faced the same problem of mounting waters in the cities. But there is no one city that reported deaths from the floods. The 3rd measure is to plan for the future. The NDRC, the Ministry of Water Resources, have published a joint work action plan for the water discharge in the flood-stricken area in China. Next, the 2 ministries will continue to work together in guiding the locality in the water discharge and the flood control and the safety work to prepare for the 20th session for the CPC Central Committee. Thank you from Phoenix TV. So what has the Ministry of the Emergent Response done in distributing the supplies to our people? Recently, the Ministry of Emergent Response has been very cautious in ensuring our people's life safety. We have strengthened our rescue teams and provided stronger supply to our people. So we will take 4 measures. First, we will make our rescue team stronger. We have a team with 43,000 people So this is the flood rescue team. We also have a forest fire control team with 4,000 members that go to different cities of China for the rescue. So we have made heavy investment in the rescue teams. We have 511 rescue teams with 81,000 people. So we will also put in place a voluntary service system at community level of China. And they will help with the transfer of our people during the flood season. We have also improved our equipment. We have provided even more professional equipment, including the UAVs and self-aid packaging facilities to facilitate the emergent response and disaster relief. In 14 major provinces and cities, we have put in place 30 UAVs. In Hubei and Anhui and 5 major provinces, we have put in place 70 major projects for flood control in the Huaihe River and Yangtze River. And they will help with the commanding work. We have put in place 7 professional rescue teams and 200 advanced facilities to help with the flood control. We also replenished our supplies to the people. We worked with the National Administration for Food Supply and the Food Reserve. We provided an emergent response supply that is worth 3.284 billion RMB. And lately, we have collected 348 million RMB of emergency response funding from the central government. We have also made the 14th emergency response plan during the 14th five-year plan period. We have made our flood control reactions stronger to prevent the floods from before they took place. For example, there was a flood in Zhujiang River lately. Before the flood took place, we made estimations and analysis about the floods. We organized our professional rescue teams and expert teams to intervene. In Guangdong and Guangxi, the fire control brigade has over 2,000 people and 2,000 equipments. To curb the severe floods in Guangdong, we put in place a special professional team for rescue with over 1,600 members. The China Construction Group also and other China's domestically owned enterprises also helped with the rescue efforts. We have produced emergency response plans to intervene. Thank you. I'm from New Beijing Daily. There was 2 major floods in Zhujiang. and that hit a historical high. That is the biggest floods since 1950s. So what has the government done to intervene? Since we entered the flood season, the Zhujiang River Basin faced a severe flood because the typhoon has been very strong and affects a big part of China. From the late May to the early June, the precipitations in these regions have been the strongest compared with the previous years. The middle reach of the Yangtze River and the reaches in the Zhujiang River have overlapped. The rainfalls in these regions have overlapped. There have been 9 floods lately, the biggest since 1998. And there was 7 floods in the Zhujiang River. The first time that the region faced so many floods. In the north reach of the river, there was also a severe flood. In China, the floods took place in over 487 rivers, causing great loss in the water management area. The Ministry of Water Resources follow closely the instructions from General Secretary Xi Jinping. We worked closely with relevant central departments for the flood control and disaster relief. We carried out an early reporting system to press ahead with the flood control. We ensured that no one is hurt during the flood season, and the dam will not be destroyed, and the major infrastructure will not be destroyed. So far, we have reached our periodic targets in the flood control. We also watched closely the public opinion, and we launched over 1,190 early warning messages on the floods. We published over 260,000 messages of early warning to the public. Secondly, we will take decisive and accurate manner for the flood control. Our ministry has compiled symposiums to study the floods, and we also visited the locality for commanding the locality in the flood control. And we made it clear that a system should be established in the locality for the flood control. We organized 2,600 local reservoirs and transferred over 56,000 people to decrease the effects of the floods. We have taken a comprehensive approach and a systematic manner for flood control. First, we take accurate measures in coping with the floods in the 13 reservoirs. Thirdly, for the lower reaches of the flood-stricken rivers, we intervened to cut the water flows. This is to ensure that the Zhujiang River will have no floods again. We mobilized relevant departments for the rescue. We mobilized several reservoirs in the surrounding areas for discharging the water in the flood-stricken river. So we called upon other cities to help with distributing, sharing the burden for flood control. So this system has played a critical role in addressing the problem in an accurate manner. We decreased the water level in Luzhou by 1.8 meters. We decreased the water level in the Xijiang by 0.4 meters. Another measure is to make early precautions about the typhoons and strong rainstorms. We discharged working teams to the locality to intervene in Liaohe River, in the surrounding reservoirs. We control the water levels, and we discharge the floods. We strengthened the protection of the dams of the Liaohe River, as well as the middle scale and the small scale rivers. We discharged a responsibility name list for 719 local reservoirs and make sure that they fulfill their duties through phone calls. So each reservoir will have one person on duty and held in responsibility to prevent to make sure that the dam will stay safe. So we take measures to prevent major floods and major disasters, to protect the life and wealth of our people. I'm from the front page news. The floods has been very severe and posed challenges to our people. So what has the Ministry of Emergency Response done? Well, the typhoons have been very frequent in China, causing severe disasters. Each year, there was 6 to 8 typhoons landing in China. Lately, the typhoons have plagued South China and East China. This year, in order to cope with the typhoons, the Ministry of the Emergency Response has taken the following measures. First, we have been more active in guarding against the typhoons. We revised our plans for coping with the typhoons. We guide on the local levels, at the community level and the village level to and provide them with a one-page guidebook and a one-page guidance for coping with the typhoons. Secondly, we strengthen the screening and check for the projects and the facilities in the typhoon-stricken areas. We improved. We have provided a stronger protection to these facilities to make sure that they survive during the typhoon season. And we screened out the risk points during the flood season. For the city and rural areas, we strengthened the safety measures, especially for those areas more prone to the threat of floods. Thirdly, we strengthened the joint discussions and the joint study on the typhoons. We followed closely the developments of the typhoons at the early stage. Our ministry worked with the relevant departments and discussed these issues for better decision-making about the typhoon relief and response actions. And we are cautious about the risks. Fourthly, we strengthened the transfer the transfer of the people threatened by the typhoons. We mobilized the special teams and to transfer the people in the construction areas, in the coastal areas, to get them on board and transferred. And we made sure that each household and each member of the family will be transferred to the right place. Before the typhoon landed in China, we classified the season into 3 periods, including the flood season, including a typhoon season. And we made sure that the elderly and the weak group of people will be transferred. And they will be the major group of people to be attended. So we must protect the life and the safety of our people. We coordinated with the departments in the water resources, the land resources, and the response management to discharge a stronger rescue team and distribute the supplies to our people. For those areas that have their electricity and the power supply cut and water supply cut, we will make sure that the relevant authorities will provide access of our people to the water, electricity, and power supply. Thank you. From China's county-level economic daily. This year, recently there has been severe natural disasters. So what has the Ministry of Natural Resources done, and what will be the measures to cope with these risks? Thank you for your question, and thank you for your interest in the geological disasters. There were 4,872 geological disasters in China this year, causing great economic loss. The direct economic loss has increased by 156% compared with the same period last year. For the first half of 2022, the number of geographical disasters has surpassed that of the total number of the last year. So the natural disasters has caused over 4,000 deaths causing 290 million RMB of economic loss. Since the end of May this year, the heavy rainfalls hit hard the southern part of China. Jiangxi, Hunan, Guangdong, Guangxi, and other provinces have seen over 4,000 mud floods and natural disasters. So the natural disasters have been very strong and quick this year. We have discharged over 50,000 people in the professional rescue team. We transferred successfully 300,000 Chinese people. So this year, the natural disasters has posed a severe challenge. But we will follow closely the important instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping and take relevant measures to intervene. First, we will strengthen our mobilization efforts. Secondly, we initiated 5 emergent response in the natural disaster relief. We dispatched 67 expert teams, including 280 people. And the teams have been put into full operation. We worked with the National Administration of Meteorological Science to publish the weather forecast and the natural disaster forecast for the 24 hours, 72 hours. We also published messages about the high risk response. For the second half of 2022, there will be both floods and a drought in North and South China. The Ministry of Natural Resources will take the following measures. First, we will better coordinate the disaster relief and the drought relief in North and South China. We will put in place an early warning system to help transfer our people in the disaster-stricken areas in a timely manner. Secondly, we will better guide the local government in their emergent response and to screen out the risk points. When they face high risks, we will make sure that our people will be transferred. Thirdly, we will raise the awareness of our people on the disaster relief and emergency management. Thank you from Southern Metropolitan Daily. Since the floods took place this July, so what has we done to cope with the disasters? Since the strong rainfall took place in Zhengzhou last July, the State Council organized an investigation team to look into the event. The Ministry of Emergency Management worked with the local governments to put into action the instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping. And we made it important that we draw the lessons from this event. First, we will study into the event and identify our weaknesses. We distributed a working plan. We published 21,000 copies and distributed the working plan to county levels so that they will make sound plans and take wise actions, and to better protect the life, safety, and the wealth of our people. And that will prepare us better for the extreme weathers and severe natural disasters. Second, we improved our ability in coping with the disasters. The Ministry of Emergency Management and the Ministry of Water Resources carried out a special training that benefited 16,000 people. We have dispatched expert teams to carry out trainings towards our people in the locality. We also improved the science education in the flood control. The relevant departments and authorities also carried out their own trainings. $1.846 million people have benefited from the trainings. Another measure is to strengthen our coordination in our emergency response. The National Emergency Response Headquarters revised our working plan in the disaster relief and emergency response. We improved our guiding mechanism and strengthened the coordination with departments at the central level. We made a more detailed plan for the intervention measures. The Ministry of Emergency Response and the China Administration of Meteorological Science published a joint working plan for collective response, for collective emergency response. The fourth measure, we took even quicker reactions, and we have been quicker in our emergency response. We mobilized firefighters that amounts to 47,000 people that went to 34 cities and regions of China. Eight 870,000 people from the enterprise level have matched with the central government-controlled enterprises. These measures are critical to ensure that we launch early response. We also strengthened the ability in the community level. At village level, we put in place more hands with the rescue teams, and that will save our time for the natural disaster relief. You know, time is very precious in the emergency response. Sometimes there can be parts of the roads that are destroyed during the floods. So in facing these challenges, we must be quicker and swifter in our response. Last but not least, we carried out more drills at the provincial levels. We worked with Henan, Hubei, we carried out an review after action. So to review our lessons for the July 20th floods in Zhengzhou last year. The different regions and cities have performed a large amount of trainings and drills. The floor is open for more questions. Thank you. I'm from Hongxin News. So, the Ministry of Emergency Response and Administration of Meteorological Science published a document on establishing a responsibility system at community level. So could you give us more information on that? Thank you for your question. China has a large population and a vast territory. And our territory has a complex structure. Recently, the natural disasters posed severe challenges and threats to our people. The floods and the rainfalls normally took place at night, and this will cause even more deaths and casualties. So we are keen to establish an information sharing system for emergency response. That's why we published a guiding document to solve 3 problems. The first problem is to ensure that the responsibility is passed to the community level. Once the disaster breaks out, we must take swift actions to intervene. As I mentioned, the mud flows and the mountainous floods normally take place at night. So it is important to send, even by sending the precautionary messages, does not help. So the phone calls will help. We must make phone calls to wake up those in sleep. So the persons in charge of these departments at the party committee and at the local governments must receive the precautionary messages in a timely manner, and they should not waste the time. The second problem is about the horizontal communication of the precautionary messages for the natural disasters. We have put in place an information sharing system to ensure that these emergency messages will be published through the information sharing platforms. And the platform will be very important to disseminate this information. And we must ensure that the messages pass between different levels of government. And we strengthened the coordination and joint response across different departments. In the past, the response departments for example, when there is a disaster in the reservoir, the departments will not initiate their response until the disaster happens. But now it's different. We ask the local stations to initiate the response beforehand. The authorities for the emergency response must collect the information beforehand and make early estimations. So if there is a red signal of alert, the local government must take decisive measures, including suspending the classes, the schools, the operations to protect the life safety and the wealth of our people. Well, thank you for your questions, and also I'd like to thank the speakers for your contribution. This is the end of today's presser. Thank you.